228. 2.5 miles. 6 minutes. Hold those numbers. Don't set them down. Don't move past them. Don't let your mind slide forward even one sentence until those 3 numbers are locked into your memory, because by the time this story reaches its final word, you will understand with absolute and total clarity why those 3 numbers have kept federal investigators sealed inside a room, staring at 10,000 hours of surveillance footage, cross-referencing medical data against Ring camera timestamps, and pulling dormant server records from the back-end infrastructure of a consumer-grade doorbell camera. You will understand why the FBI, one of the most publicly communicative law enforcement agencies on the planet when it serves their interests, has said almost nothing about what that footage contains. And you will understand why the silence surrounding this case is not the silence of an investigation that has stalled. It is the silence of an investigation that has found something it is not yet ready to say out loud. This is the Nancy Guthrie case. And if you think you already know the shape of it, if you've followed the headlines, if you've watched the press conferences, if you've read every update posted since the 1st of February, 2026, you still don't have the full picture. Not yet. Not the way it needs to be told. Not with every number in its proper place and every piece of documented evidence laid out in the sequence that makes the architecture of this case impossible to look away from. That is what this is. That is what you stayed for. And we are going to go through every single piece of it together. Before we go any further, if this case has been living in the back of your mind since the moment it broke, if you've been waiting for someone to put the complete picture together without cutting corners and without leaving the hardest questions unanswered, drop a comment right now and type the words "I found her story." Let this community know you are here. Tell us where you are watching from. Your city. Your country. What time it is where you are sitting right now. This channel has been running parallel to this investigation from the very first day, and your presence here is not passive observation. It is active witness. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. When this case moves, and the evidence makes absolutely clear that it is already moving, Storysoft the Missing J is where you will hear it first. Every development. Every confirmed detail. Every moment this investigation surfaces into public view. This is where it lands first. Now. Back to those numbers. At 2:28 in the morning on the 1st of February, 2026, a cardiac monitoring application on Nancy Guthrie's iPhone registered a disconnection. Her pacemaker, a small implanted device that had been tracking the electrical activity of her heart around the clock, every hour of every day, through every night she slept in the house she had called home for more than 5 decades, lost its Bluetooth link to her phone. The connection that had existed continuously, that had sent her heart's data to that application through the walls of her bedroom and across the quiet of her house in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, went dead. At 2:28 in the morning. While the desert was dark and still and no one on her street had any reason to be awake. That disconnection is not a theory. It is not speculation. It is not a detail sourced from an anonymous tip or a social media post running unchecked through a true crime forum. It is a documented, time-stamped medical data point that investigators confirmed publicly and on the record. Senior officials briefed on the investigation told NBC News that this signal loss occurred in the early morning hours of February 1st. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed it. The FBI confirmed it. The timestamp does not lie. It does not shift. It does not soften under pressure. It does not change its story depending on who is asking. At 2:28 in the morning, that device registered an event. And that event is now the forensic spine of one of the most significant missing persons investigations the FBI has opened in recent years. Now understand what that disconnection means from an investigative standpoint. There are exactly 3 scenarios under which a pacemaker monitoring application loses its connection to a paired phone. The first, the phone is moved beyond Bluetooth range of the implanted device. The second, the application is manually disabled by someone with access to the phone. The third, the person wearing the pacemaker is physically relocated beyond the signal threshold of her own home network. Every single one of those three scenarios requires the same operational conclusion. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie was no longer stationary. She was being moved. Not walking. Not choosing. Not making a phone call first or leaving a note or pausing at the door to take one last look at the home she had built her life inside. At 2:28, that device recorded the exact moment her world and her home separated. And it recorded a time. She was 84 years old. She had lived in the same home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson for more than 50 years. She required daily cardiac medication. She depended on that monitoring device for her continued health and safety. She had no reason, not one documented, verified, or even suggested reason, to be anywhere other than asleep in her own bed at 2:28 in the morning on the 1st of February. The timestamp does not lie. And it did not lie then. Now the second number. 2.5 miles. On Camino Royale, a quiet residential back road threading through the northern corridor of Tucson, a stretch of asphalt that on most nights sees almost no traffic between midnight and sunrise, a neighbor's Ring camera captured footage at 2:36 in the morning. A vehicle. Moving through that corridor at a time when almost no one on that road has any reason to be moving at all. The Pima County Sheriff confirmed publicly that the timing of this vehicle's appearance aligns with the investigative timeline. The FBI confirmed the same. And then, both agencies went silent. Completely. Deliberately. Silent, around what that footage shows, what that vehicle is, what direction it was traveling, and where it was heading at 2:36 in the morning on a back road in the northern corridor of Tucson. NBC correspondent Liz Kitts drove the route. She drove it herself, making the same choices a deliberate driver would make at 2:30 in the morning. She took the back road corridor. The route that avoids major intersections. The path someone takes when the objective is not convenience, it is invisibility. When the goal is to move quickly and not attract a single second glance from a single set of eyes. She drove it the way someone drives it when they already know it. When they have already thought about it before they ever got behind the wheel. That drive took exactly 6 minutes. 2:28. The pacemaker disconnects. Add 6 minutes. You arrive at 2:34. The vehicle appeared on camera at 2:36. 2 minutes of margin between the cardiac data and the camera footage. 2 minutes sitting between the moment Nancy Guthrie was moved from her home and the moment a vehicle moving through a residential back road 2.5 miles away was captured on a neighbor's Ring camera. And you need to understand something about those 2 minutes, because every outlet covering this case has looked at them and called them a discrepancy. They are not a discrepancy. They are a data point. Ask yourself, if you had just moved someone from a locked residence in complete darkness, what would you do in the 2 minutes before accelerating onto a back road? You check your mirrors. You adjust. You remove anything obscuring your face. You scan the road ahead. You confirm you are alone. You take one breath. You compose yourself. You allow your body to shift from the operational phase of a plan, the part that requires physical precision and controlled movement in a confined space in total darkness, into the exit phase. The part where the objective is to be unremarkable. To look like nothing. To be the vehicle a sleepless neighbor sees from a window at 2:30 in the morning and immediately forgets. 2 minutes is the behavioral signature of that transition. It is not a gap in the evidence. It is evidence. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nano stated publicly that the vehicle's appearance is consistent with the investigative timeline. That statement is on the record. That is not a leak. Not a source who asked to remain anonymous. Not a theory assembled from publicly available satellite imagery and posted on a forum. That is the lead agency on this investigation placing a vehicle at a specific location within a specific window, a window defined not by eyewitness memory or departmental estimate, but by medical data pulled from a cardiac monitoring device implanted in the chest of an 84-year-old woman who was alone in her house at 2:28 in the morning. Now here is what the FBI has not said publicly. They have 10,000 hours of footage. They have cell tower records documenting which devices moved through that corridor between the Catalina foothills and Camino Royale between 2 and 3 in the morning. They have license plate reader data from every route surrounding that corridor. They have the full suite of digital intelligence a federal agency can pull from a geographic area in the 24 hours surrounding a confirmed abduction. They have the footage from that Ring camera. They have the vehicle on tape. And they have made zero public statements about the vehicle's make, its model, its color, its direction of travel, the name on any registration connected to it. Nothing. Not one word. The FBI does not go silent around evidence it does not have. The FBI goes silent around evidence it is protecting. Around evidence it is building a case with. Around evidence that, if released prematurely, tells the person they are watching exactly what the agency already knows. A retired NYPD detective who reviewed the Ring camera footage publicly assessed the vehicle as a Kia Soul, a compact crossover. Not a van. Not a cargo vehicle designed to move things without being seen. A passenger vehicle. Common. Quiet. Forgettable. The kind of car that moves through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning and registers to a half-awake neighbor as nothing at all. A shape in the dark. Already gone before it fully forms in their memory. That is not an accident. That is a selection. Someone chose that vehicle specifically because it would not be remembered. And the choices a person makes before they act reveal everything about what kind of person they are and how long they have been thinking about this. Camino Royale feeds directly into East River Road. From that junction, the driver had immediate access to 4 completely separate directions. South on Oracle Road, toward Tucson City Center and Interstate 19, which runs 60 miles directly to the Mexican border at Rio Rico. West on Campbell Avenue, through residential corridors and into a specific part of Tucson's urban grid. North toward Oro Valley, the suburb sitting at the top of the Catalina foothills and home to a specific individual whose name this investigation has returned to more than once and through more than one channel. East, into open desert. Sparse residential density. Dry washes. Trailheads. Terrain where a former law enforcement official publicly assessed that a person could remain unlocated for months within a 2 to 5 mile radius of Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI knows which direction that car was traveling at 2:36 in the morning. They have not said. And that silence, that specific, surgical withholding of a single directional detail from a case that has received national media coverage and federal resources, means one of exactly 2 things. They do not want the driver to know that the footage has been identified and analyzed. Or they do not want the driver to know that the direction has already been traced back to a destination. Either way, the silence is not confusion. It is not incompetence. It is not bureaucratic delay. It is architecture. Someone built it deliberately. And what they built it around is still being assembled piece by piece inside a room that the public has not been allowed to see inside. 2 names sit at the center of that architecture. 2 men whose documented histories, geographic positions, and behavioral records place them inside the frame of this investigation, not through accusation, not through social media speculation, not through the kind of amateur theorizing that attaches itself to high-profile missing persons cases and does more damage than good, but through the accumulated, publicly verified, officially confirmed weight of documented fact. 1 man dropped Nancy Guthrie at her front door 4 hours before she was moved from her home and has not spoken a single word publicly in more than 5 weeks. 1 man whose physical profile falls precisely within the measurements the FBI established through forensic reconstruction performed at her front entrance under controlled lighting conditions replicating the infrared environment of the camera that captured the figure approaching her door. Tommaso Dominic Evans. 19 years of documented connection binding them to each other and both of them to the same road, the same corridor, the same 6-minute window. The car appeared at 2:36. The cardiac monitoring device disconnected at 2:28. The drive between those 2 points takes 6 minutes. But here is what every single outlet covering this case has failed to connect. The vehicle alone is not what makes this evidence difficult to challenge. What makes it difficult to challenge is what investigators call a behavioral artifact. A pattern of choices, routes, and documented movements that, taken individually, can each be explained away. But assembled across multiple dates and multiple observations and multiple independently confirmed data points, it builds a portrait that is extraordinarily difficult to dismantle. The kind of portrait that does not merely suggest. It demonstrates. And the behavioral record sitting at the center of this investigation goes back much further than the 1st of February. But before the evidence, before the footage, before the names and the numbers and the forensic reconstruction, you need to know exactly who this woman is. Because the moment you understand her life, the targeting becomes impossible to look at any other way. Nancy Ellen Long was born on the 27th of January, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She graduated from the University of Kentucky. She married Charles Errol Guthrie on the 28th of December, 1963, and built a life that crossed continents and planted its deepest roots in the high desert above Tucson, Arizona. Charles was a mining engineer. His work took their family to Melbourne, Australia, where their youngest daughter Savannah was born in 1971. 2 years later, the family landed in Tucson. They settled into a burnt adobe home in the Catalina foothills near Campbell Avenue and Skyline Drive, tucked into the desert above the city, surrounded by the kind of landscape that gets into a person and never fully leaves. They planted roots there. Nancy never left. She raised 3 children in that neighborhood. Savannah, Annie, Cameron. She built a career in public relations at the University of Arizona for nearly 2 decades. She became known by colleagues as someone who made the work lighter and the team stronger. Someone whose presence in a room changed the quality of what happened inside it. When Charles died suddenly of a cardiac event during a work trip to Mexico in 1988, Nancy was 46 years old. She set aside her own grief to hold her family together. Savannah, then 16 years old, would later say on the Today Show that her mother met every hard moment with iron discipline and unshakable faith. That she did not flinch. That she did not retreat. That she held the line for everyone around her even when holding it cost her everything she had. She never remarried. She never left the foothills. She lived alone in that same home for more than 50 years, in the house where she had raised her children, in the neighborhood she knew the way most people know their own name. By February of 2026, Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had limited mobility. She depended on a pacemaker. She required daily cardiac medication to manage her heart condition. But her mind, by all family accounts and confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, remained completely intact. She was sharp. Independent. Fixed in her routines with the kind of precision that comes from decades of choosing the same good habits over and over until they become as automatic as breathing. She attended a virtual church service every Sunday morning without exception. When she did not appear on February 1st, a church member called the family. The family searched the home. Then they called 911. Where are you watching from right now? Stop for just a moment and drop your location in the comments. Your city. Your state. Your country. Type "I'm still here" so this community knows you have not looked away. The story of the Missing J community follows this case more closely than any outlet covering it, and your presence here is not incidental. It is part of how this story stays visible. How Nancy's name keeps moving through the world. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with one person tonight who deserves to know the full picture. And then stay, because what comes next is where this case stops being a disappearance and starts being something that was planned long before the 1st of February. Nancy Guthrie did not vanish. She was taken. And the people who took her knew exactly where she was, how she lived, and when she would be alone. Saturday, January 31st, 2026. The last ordinary evening Nancy Guthrie would ever have inside the home she had occupied for more than 5 decades. At 5:32 in the afternoon, she opened the Uber app on her phone, requested a ride, and made the short trip from her Catalina foothills home to her daughter Annie's house nearby. She had dinner there. She played card games. She spent roughly 4 hours with Annie and Tommaso Cioni, the man Annie had married into the Guthrie family. The evening was routine. Comfortable. Warm in the way that evenings with family are warm when everyone present believes there will be more evenings just like it. Nothing about it, by any account from anyone who was there, was unusual in any way. At approximately 9:48 in the evening, Tommaso Cioni drove Nancy home. Her garage door opened. It closed again at 9:50. Cioni confirmed later that he watched the door close and waited until he was certain she was safely inside before he pulled away from the property. That 2-minute window, the garage opening, Nancy moving through it, the door closing behind her, is the last confirmed, documented moment that anyone connected to this case can place Nancy Guthrie inside her home, alive and accounted for, with another person present who can verify it. Then the house goes quiet. The lights go off. And the clock starts. For the next 3 hours and 57 minutes, the verified record is silent. No outgoing calls. No outbound messages. No movement registered on any subscribed recording system inside the property. Nancy Guthrie was alone in a house she had occupied for more than 50 years. In a neighborhood she had known since 1973. In a bed she had slept in through 5 decades of desert nights and desert mornings and everything in between. Whatever was coming for her, she had no reason to expect it. No reason to be afraid. No reason to do anything other than sleep. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera mounted at her front entrance disconnected. Not a power surge. Not a technical malfunction. Not a coincidence of timing that an investigator would look at and set aside. The device went offline at a specific moment in a specific window that the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed publicly is directly relevant to the timeline of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The FBI confirmed the same. The camera did not fail. Someone removed its ability to record before approaching the front door. That is not a coincidence. That is sequencing. That is the first visible step in a plan being executed in real time, in darkness, at 1:47 in the morning on a residential street in the Catalina foothills of Tucson. Approximately 25 minutes later, at around 2:12 in the morning, a secondary Nest camera elsewhere on the property registered a motion detection event. There was no recording. Nancy did not have an active cloud subscription on that device. The software detected movement. The drive that should have captured it was empty. Then 2:28 in the morning. The cardiac monitoring application on Nancy Guthrie's iPhone lost its connection to her pacemaker. Her phone was recovered inside the home. Her wallet was recovered inside the home. Her hearing aid. Her daily cardiac medication. Her car. Every item that would indicate a person made a conscious and voluntary decision to leave was found exactly where she had left it. Undisturbed. Waiting. As though she had only stepped out for a moment and intended to return. She did not step out. She did not call anyone. She did not leave a note or take her medication or charge her phone for whatever came next. She left nothing behind except everything she owned, and a cardiac monitoring application that recorded the exact moment she was separated from the device keeping her heart in rhythm. When investigators entered the residence and processed the front entrance, they recovered biological trace material that was confirmed by DNA analysis to belong to Nancy Guthrie. Sheriff Nanos told the New York Times that there were additional things at that scene that, in his words, did not sit well, details he declined to elaborate on publicly. Details that the investigation has protected from the moment they were discovered. The front doorbell camera mount was empty. The device itself had been removed from its housing and taken. In 41 minutes, between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning, someone moved through a locked, gated residential property in complete darkness. They neutralized the recording equipment in a specific sequence. They located and physically removed an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility from a home she had not left voluntarily in more than 50 years. They moved her through a front entrance that left behind biological trace material and an empty camera mount. And they did all of it without triggering a single alarm that saved a single frame of footage. That level of precision does not belong to a stranger. It does not belong to someone who passed that house at random one afternoon and decided on impulse to return in the dark. It belongs to someone who had already mapped every corner of that property in their mind before they ever set foot on it. Someone who had already thought through the cameras, the timing, the route, and the 2 minutes between the cardiac disconnect and the point where the road would take them somewhere the footage could not follow. And the evidence waiting on the other side of that front entrance was about to tell investigators exactly what kind of person they were building their case around. 9 days. That is how long the critical footage sat beyond reach. When investigators first processed Nancy Guthrie's Nest doorbell camera after she was reported missing on February 1, 2026, the answer was right there. Mounted to the front of her house. 6 feet above the entrance she had walked through 10,000 times. But without an active cloud subscription on that device, the locally stored footage was gone. The camera had seen everything. The drive that should have held it was empty. Then the FBI's technical team went deeper. Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly on February 10 that agents had recovered footage from residual data located in the back-end systems of the camera's server infrastructure. Google provided technical assistance. And what that recovery pulled from dormant server data changed the entire public face of this investigation in a single moment. The footage showed a masked figure approaching Nancy Guthrie's front door in the early hours of February 1. The subject was covered entirely, dark clothing, black gloves, sneakers, a face mask that the FBI noted appeared lighter in the footage due to the Nest camera's infrared imaging technology. The mask was black. The subject was carrying a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack, a backpack sold exclusively under Walmart's private label brand, available in stores across the country, designed for anonymity as much as function. And the individual was carrying what appeared to be a secured firearm in a front-mounted holster on their body. Retired FBI agents and law enforcement analysts who reviewed the footage publicly noted something specific about the way the figure moved. Not rushed. Not panicked. Not the frantic, improvised movement of someone acting on impulse in a moment of desperation. One former FBI agent described the approach as almost relaxed. As though the subject moved through that entrance the way someone moves through a space they already know. There was no hesitation at the gate. No pause to orient. No visible moment of uncertainty about which direction to move or where the camera was positioned. The geometry of that property appeared familiar to the person walking through it. The figure raised a gloved hand and placed it directly over the camera lens. Then, when that proved insufficient to fully disable the device, reached into the vegetation at the front of the property and used a cut section of shrub to cover the lens completely. Hand first. Then vegetation. That sequence is not improvisation. That is a method. That is a person who had thought about that camera before they arrived. Who had already decided, on a previous occasion, that the hand alone would not be enough and that something physical and available at the scene would need to be used to complete the block. Someone who had already rehearsed this moment before they lived it. Here is where the footage becomes most significant from a forensic standpoint. The FBI released 2 distinct sets of images from the doorbell camera recovery. A source confirmed to CNN that the images were captured on 2 separate dates, not only the morning of February 1. The subject had been at Nancy Guthrie's front door before the night she vanished. They had been there before. They had approached that entrance, assessed the camera, determined what it could capture and what it could not, and returned on the night of the abduction prepared with a method and a backpack and a firearm and a vehicle parked somewhere between the property and the back road 2.5 miles away. The FBI erected a white tent over Nancy Guthrie's front entrance. They ran measurements under forensic lighting conditions designed to replicate the infrared environment of the Nest camera. They dressed agents in replica clothing and confirmed, through controlled reconstruction, the subject's height is somewhere between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall. Average build. The kind of physical profile that fits without standing out. The kind of person you pass on a sidewalk and do not look back at. And in the infrared footage, former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clementi identified what appeared to be a marking on the subject's right wrist. Possibly a tattoo. If confirmed by the investigation, that marker becomes a biometric anchor, the kind of identifying detail that rules people in or out of a suspect pool with a precision that no eyewitness account and no physical description can approach. A permanent mark. Something that cannot be removed by pulling off a glove or changing a jacket or driving a forgettable car through a neighborhood in the dark. Ask yourself this. What kind of person scouts a residence on one occasion, returns on a second occasion fully prepared with a specific backpack and a specific weapon and a specific method for disabling a specific camera, and then moves through a locked front entrance in complete darkness without triggering a single alarm that preserved a single frame of footage? The answer to that question is not a stranger. It has never been a stranger. It is someone operating from prior knowledge. From familiarity. From access. From the kind of information about a person's home and habits and schedule that is not gathered quickly and is not gathered from a distance. And the two names this investigation keeps returning to both had that kind of access. When investigators need to understand a disappearance, the first question they ask is the simplest one. Who was the last person to see her? In this case, that answer has never changed. It has pointed to the same man from the very first day. Tommaso Cioni is 50 years old. He was born on the 18th of June, 1975, in San Giovanni Valdarno, historic medieval town in the Tuscany region of Italy. He relocated to Tucson in 2006, the same year he married Nancy Guthrie, Nancy's eldest daughter. He has taught 6th grade science and AP biology at Basis Oro Valley School for more than 15 years. His school sits approximately 10 miles north of Nancy Guthrie's Catalina Foothills home, in the suburb that sits at the top of the corridor the FBI has spent weeks analyzing. He describes himself in a personal biography on an Italian Cultural Association website as someone who writes when he gets the chance, studies lizards, plays electric bass, and makes homemade pasta. By every external measure, a quiet man. A private man. A man whose life, on its surface, reads as ordinary in every detail. He drove Nancy home on the night of January 31st. He confirmed she was safely inside before he pulled away. His car left her driveway at 9:50 in the evening. And from that moment, the documented record of his involvement in this investigation is both extensive and almost entirely one-sided. The FBI searched Annie and Cion's home 5 separate times. The first search occurred on February 7, 6 days after Nancy was reported missing. Investigators returned to the property and remained inside for several hours, photographing multiple rooms while law enforcement vehicles surrounded the perimeter. 5 searches. The same address. The same man. The federal government returned to that location 5 times. That is not procedural routine. That is not investigators being thorough in a general sense. That is a specific and sustained focus on a specific person and a specific location, because what they are finding when they go there requires them to go back again. The behavioral record attached to this case does not begin on the 1st of February. It extends backward through documented dates, verified movements, and a pattern of choices that investigators have been assembling not just from the footage recovered from a dormant server, but from every data point this investigation has been quietly gathering since the moment Nancy Guthrie's name was first entered into the federal system. 2:28 in the morning. The pacemaker disconnects. 2.5 miles away, a back road sits empty in the dark. 6 minutes later, a vehicle appears on a neighbor's camera and keeps moving. And somewhere between those numbers, inside the silence that the FBI has built around what it knows and what it has found and what it is preparing to do with all of it, Nancy Guthrie is still waiting to be found. This community does not stop. This channel does not stop. And her name does not stop moving through the world until there is an answer that is real and confirmed and delivered with the weight it deserves. If you made it to the end of this story, if you sat with every number, every name, every documented detail from the first second to this one, then you already understand why this case is different. Why the silence surrounding it is different. Why the evidence assembled around it is the kind that does not collapse under pressure. Drop a comment right now and tell us, what detail in this investigation do you believe the FBI is most deliberately protecting? What piece of this case do you think is being held back not because they don't have it, but because releasing it would change everything? Your read on this matters here. The most compelling answer gets pinned. Subscribe to Storysoft the Missing J. Share this video tonight with one person who deserves to know the full picture of what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Every view keeps her name visible. Every share puts this story in front of someone new who might be the person who finally sees the detail that matters. And to Nancy Guthrie, wherever you are tonight, this channel has not stopped. We are still looking. We are still saying your name. And we are still here.